Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world.
And today we are turning the lens completely inward.
Yeah, we're looking at the architecture of the one system that literally controls how you perceive every other system in your life.
Right, the human mind.
And honestly, it is about time we did this. I mean, we spend so much time analyzing external systems on this show, right? Economics, politics, healthcare infrastructure. But we rarely stop to actually look at the processor that is interpreting all of that data.
The filter. Because if the lens is dirty, the whole world looks dirty.
Exactly. So specifically for this deep dive, we are examining a book by Dr. Caroline Leaf called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess.
And the subtitle there is important. It's 5 simple, scientifically proven steps to reduce anxiety, stress, and toxic thinking.
Right. Now, I have to be completely honest with you and with the listeners. When I first saw that title, I thought, oh boy.
Here we go again.
Exactly. I saw the subtitle and I just thought, okay, another self-help book telling me to just manifest happiness and drink more water.
It does trigger that immediate skepticism. It's got that checkout aisle vibe,
Yeah.
Fix your entire life in 5 simple steps.
It really does. But,
Yeah.
and this is a massive, if we just dismiss this as standard self-help, we are completely missing the forest for the trees here.
Yeah, we aren't just doing a book review today.
No, absolutely not. What we are doing is a systems-level analysis of a comprehensive mind management framework.
We're looking at the institutionalization of mental health responsibility.
Yes, which is a heavy concept because Dr. Leaf isn't just, she's not just a motivational speaker.
No, she's a communication pathologist and a cognitive neuroscientist.
Right, so she is proposing a structural systems-level change to how we operate our own biological hardware. This isn't just thinking positive thoughts.
It's structural engineering for your brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the mission for this deep dive is to trace the entry point of this specific framework into the broader system of identity.
Because books are entry points. And identity is a system.
Right. It's about how we define ourselves. The central question this source material is asking you is, are we just victims of our biology?
Bound by genetics.
Genetics, chemical imbalances, or, and this is the alternative she presents, are we the bosses of our brains?
Which is such a thrilling but also incredibly dangerous question. Because, if I'm the boss of my brain, I have some serious questions about why my employee is waking me up at 3 in the morning with a panic attack.
Right, you need to call HR on your own brain.
Seriously.
But to explore this properly, we really need to be methodical. We're going to follow our standard roadmap for these deep dives.
So we're building this through 5 distinct phases.
Yes. Design, incentives, outcomes, persistence, and finally, interconnection.
Which keeps us grounded. It keeps us from getting lost in the weeds of all the wellness jargon.
Exactly. So let's just set the context right up front. What is the primary system under examination here?
At its core, it is a self-directed cognitive management model.
Okay, let's break that down for people.
Sure. Self-directed meaning you do it yourself.
Yeah.
You don't need a doctor or a therapist in the room. And cognitive management means you are actively, structurally supervising your own thoughts.
And the specific technical term the source uses for this is directed neuroplasticity.
Framed as this 5-step process called the Neurocycle.
Right. Now, we have all heard the buzzword neuroplasticity. You can't escape it.
It's everywhere. Basically, it just means the brain is plastic, it's malleable, it changes shape based on experience.
But usually when people talk about neuroplasticity, it's framed as something that just happens to you.
Yeah, reactive neuroplasticity. You experience a trauma, your brain physically changes, you learn to juggle, your brain changes, the outside world shapes the brain.
But Dr. Leaf is arguing for directed neuroplasticity. The core argument here is that the tool she proposes, this neurocycle, is a mechanism to direct that structural change intentionally.
To grab the steering wheel. Instead of just letting the river carve the canyon wherever the water happens to flow, you are coming in with heavy machinery and digging the canal.
That is a great analogy, and she makes a very big promise with this. She claims that by using the structured intervention, you can significantly reduce anxiety and toxic thinking.
Because it redefines the user from a passive recipient of biology to an active architect.
Right, a profound shift in power dynamics. You are not your brain, you are the user of your brain.
Which brings us perfectly into phase 1. The design.
Let's unpack the design, because this entire system rests on one foundational distinction. And if you don't buy into this distinction, the whole framework collapses.
You're talking about the separation of the mind and the brain.
Yes, the mind versus the physical brain.
And we should point out, this is a somewhat controversial design feature. because in a lot of modern materialist neuroscience, the mind is basically viewed as a byproduct of the brain.
Right. The brain fires off neurons, chemicals swirl around, and consciousness, the mind, is just the exhaust fumes of that physical machine.
Exactly. In that model, the brain is the boss. But this source material flips that entirely. She argues the mind and the brain are completely separate.
She defines the mind as how you think, feel, and choose. And there's this stat she throws out that the mind is basically 90 to 99% of who you are.
And the brain is just the physical organ. It's just the meat. It's the hardware that responds to the mind.
She calls it the mind in action. The brain doesn't produce the mind. The mind uses the brain.
Think of it like a computer system. The brain is your laptop. It's the motherboard, the screen, the battery. The mind is the user sitting at the keyboard typing.
Right, and if the user walks away, the laptop just sits there. It has all this potential, but zero agency.
The hardware only executes what the user codes. So if you type in a code that says initiate panic mode, the computer runs panic mode.
The computer itself isn't anxious.
No, it's just faithfully running the buggy program you wrote.
And see, this design choice fundamentally reorganizes responsibility for mental health.
Completely. Because if the brain produces the mind, then you can say, well, my brain made me do it. I have a chemical imbalance. I'm just wired this way.
Which, to be fair, can be a very comforting thought. It absolves you of the blame for your distress.
Yes. But if the mind is driving the brain, then you, the individual, hold the controls. You type the bad code.
That is heavy. It's incredibly empowering, but it is a massive burden of agency.
It is. And the mechanism for changing that code is directed neuroplasticity. The source actually references quantum theory here to explain this connection.
Right, the geodesic information processing theory.
Which, I'll admit, whenever a self-help framework invokes quantum physics, my skeptical radar goes off a bit.
Understandably. But her core argument there is essentially that thought is energy. When you think, feel, and choose, you generate quantum energy. And that energy has to go somewhere.
Right. It physically alters the brain structure. It moves proteins around. It changes chemical expressions. So a thought isn't just a ghost in the machine. A thought is a physical act of construction.
She calls this the plastic paradox. Because the brain is soft-wired, it's amazing news if you are thinking healthy thoughts. You can build a beautiful, functional city in your head.
But it is terrible news if you are ruminating on toxic thoughts. Because the brain is totally agnostic. It doesn't judge the input.
Right, your brain doesn't say, hold on, thinking about that embarrassing thing you said at a party 5 years ago is bad for us. Let's ignore it.
No, the brain says, oh, we're focusing on this embarrassing memory. Great, let me build a literal superhighway of proteins to this memory so we can obsess over it even faster tomorrow.
It's a faithful builder. If you dwell on toxic stress, your brain physically grows what she calls toxic branches or toxic trees. You are literally hardwiring your own misery.
That image of the toxic tree is so vivid, it makes you realize that spiraling mentally isn't just a passive state. You are actively doing construction work.
So if we are the architects and we have this plastic brain that just builds whatever we focus on, we clearly need tools. We can't just stare at a toxic tree and wish it away.
You need a chainsaw.
Exactly. And this brings us to the intervention tool, the 5-step neurocycle. She describes these steps as surgical instruments.
Which again implies that a toxic thought is like a foreign body or a tumor that has to be systematically excised and repaired.
So let's walk through the surgery. Step 1 is gather.
Gathering is about embracing the signal. This is completely counter to that toxic positivity culture that tells you to just ignore negative feelings.
Right. Don't be sad, just look on the bright side.
She argues that anxiety, depression, frustration, these are warning signals. They are the check engine light on your mental dashboard. You don't smash the light, you gather awareness of it.
Because if you just suppress it, she says it eventually causes a volcanic explosion later. You have to admit the signal is there. So step 1, I feel anxious.
Then step 2 is reflect. This is deep, structured interrogation. You ask the why, who, what, where. You trace the branches of that toxic tree down to the root.
You play detective. Why did that email trigger me? Was it the email or was it the tone?
And this is hard labor. It's not meditating quietly.
No, which leads to step 3, right? Or, as she calls it, the metacog.
Getting the chaotic mind onto paper to expose the mental mess. Why is the paper necessary, though?
Because thoughts are incredibly slippery. They loop endlessly. Writing forces the non-conscious mess into the conscious realm. It becomes finite words on a page.
It takes the engine apart, so you can actually see the broken piston on the table.
Exactly. Then step 4 is recheck, the mental autopsy.
You look at the data you just wrote down and search for patterns. You analyze your own triggers.
And finally, step 5 is the active reach. This is crucial for the design. You can't just dig a hole and leave it.
Right, if you do, you just have a giant hole.
The active reach is an actionable step or a specific statement to anchor the new, healthy thought you want to grow. It's the antidote.
You're planting the new tree.
Yes. And I love the philosophical framing she uses for this reconceptualization process. She uses the concept of kintsugi.
The Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold.
Right. Because the goal of this system isn't to delete your painful memories. You can't just Men in Black neuralize yourself.
The history is there. The energy is there.
But the design goal is to redesign the memory so that the pain energy transforms into recovery energy. You fill the crack with gold.
The crack is still there. It's honored. But it's neutralized. It becomes a point of beauty and strength instead of a leak.
It shifts the user from being a victim of their past to an artist of their present.
It's beautiful. And this transitions us into phase 2. Incentives, it sounds like an exhausting amount of work. Why would anyone actually do this every single day?
The incentive architecture is fascinating because it operates on 2 absolute extremes. Extreme empowerment on one side and extreme biological threat on the other.
The ultimate carrot and the ultimate stick.
Let's look at the individual incentives first. The carrot. The source promises absolute personal agency over your thoughts. You go from being a bystander in your life to a first responder.
Which is a huge draw. If you believe the traditional biomedical model that says your distress is purely circumstantial or just a biochemical glitch, that can be very disempowering.
It says you have to wait for a doctor or a pill to fix you.
But this system incentivizes you by saying, you possess the intrinsic power to heal yourself right now. And she backs this up with the 81% claim.
Yes. The clinical trial data showing that depression and anxiety were reduced by up to 81% in the experimental group using the Neurocycle, which is a staggering statistic. If a pharmaceutical company had a pill with an 81% efficacy rate over placebo for depression, it would be the biggest drug in human history.
Right. So telling a user they can achieve that just by structured thinking is a massive incentive. It makes you the hero of your own journey.
But then we have the stick, the biological incentive, or really the fear of toxicity.
And this part is actually quite terrifying. She heavily medicalizes stress. The claim is that toxic stress is responsible for up to 90% of illness.
Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, 90%.
The argument is that unmanaged toxic thinking causes low-grade inflammation and immune system suppression. If you don't manage your mind, you are physically destroying your body.
She goes down to the genetic level. She talks about telomeres.
The caps on the ends of our chromosomes, like the little plastic tips on shoelaces that keep them from fraying.
As we age, they naturally get shorter, cells die, we age. But Dr. Leaf claims that toxic thinking actively accelerates telomere shortening.
So if you were spiraling over an argument you had at work, you are literally snipping the tips off your own genetic shoelaces. You are accelerating your own aging process.
The stakes could not be higher. It's not just manage your mind so you feel a bit happier. It's manage your mind or your body will physically degenerate and you will die faster.
It connects fleeting thoughts directly to cellular death, which is a huge incentive to start doing the daily cognitive interventions.
And culturally, this lands perfectly because we are in a culture of self-optimization.
The wellness industry dynamic. We track our sleep, our macros, our steps. This just makes our cognition another metric to optimize.
Right. It frames lifestyle disease as preventable through cognition. It places the emphasis heavily on individual responsibility.
Away from pharmaceutical fixes, which the source explicitly says fall short.
So we have this intense incentive structure. Let's move to phase 3. Outcomes. What are the predictable structural outcomes of applying directed neuroplasticity?
Well, the first major structural outcome is the timeline itself, the 63-day cycle.
Which shatters the myth that it takes 21 days to form a habit.
She is very clear that 21 days is just not enough. Days 1 through 21 are for deconstruction and reconstruction, tearing down the toxic tree, planting the new one.
But if you stop at day 21, the new memory is completely fragile.
It's like planting a seed but refusing to water it. Days 22 through 63 are the habituation phase. You have to automate the new thought pattern through behavioral repetition.
It requires discipline, but the outcome of that repetition is measurable. She points to QEEG data from her clinical trials to prove it.
Brain maps. This is where the narrative of personal cognitive sovereignty gets its scientific backing. She talks about alpha asymmetry.
Right, where depressed brains often have too much energy stuck on the left side, bogged down in negative details. The outcome of the neurocycle is shifting that energy to the right, balancing it to see the big picture.
And the gamma peaks. Gamma waves indicate high-level learning and insight, the aha moments.
And conversely, a reduction in high beta activity, which is that buzzy, panicked, anxious state.
So the outcome is biological proof that your mental practice worked. It validates the user's agency.
Another crucial outcome is how this system reframes trauma.
Yeah, she distinguishes between big T trauma war, major abuse, and little t trauma, daily chronic stress, toxic workplaces, bad breakups.
Because the brain processes both as toxic stress, but the outcome here is reconceptualizing that trauma.
She uses the story of her own son's severe accident.
Right. She didn't try to erase the horrific memory of the accident.
You can't. But she managed her mind to shift from a state of panic and trauma to a possibilities mindset. She changed the emotional caption on the memory.
Which changes how the physical body reacts when that memory is triggered.
Exactly. But why does this work persist? Or, more importantly, why does the mess persist in the first place? That's phase 4, persistence.
We have to map the feedback loops. Let's start with the negative feedback loop.
Stress leads to a toxic thought. That toxic thought has a neural impact building the toxic tree. That impact causes physical symptoms like cortisol and homocysteine spikes.
Which makes you feel physically ill.
Yeah.
And then you get stressed about feeling ill.
Right. It's the nocebo effect. If a placebo is believing a fake pill will cure you, a nocebo is believing your toxic thoughts are making you sick, which literally manifests the sickness, which creates more stress.
And ignoring it, suppressing it, just builds the volcanic pressure.
So the neurocycle interrupts that loop and builds a positive feedback loop. Awareness, leading to structured reflection, leading to reconceptualization, leading to physical neural change.
And that neural change creates a feeling of, oh, I've got this.
Reinforced agency, which makes you want to do the cycle again.
But there is also immense institutional reinforcement for why this system persists right now in society.
Look at the state of the world. Rising mental health distress. Anxiety rates are through the roof.
The source mentions the pandemic, economic uncertainty. When the structural world feels completely out of control, the desire for actionable control over your own mind is incredibly powerful.
It's accessible. You don't need to be on a wait list for a therapist for 6 months. You can grab a pen and paper and start the neurocycle today.
It's highly compatible with our productivity culture.
Which brings us to phase 5, interconnection. How does this system nest within larger systems?
It deeply connects to biomedical models of health. The source explicitly uses the framework of psychoneuroimmunology.
Which is just a massive word for the study of how the mind, the brain, and the immune system interact.
It literally connects the non-conscious mind, which she describes in almost spiritual terms, directly to physical blood work. It treats mental and physical health as a single system.
Driven entirely by the mind. It also nests perfectly into the psychology of self-optimization and neoliberal individual responsibility frameworks.
Explain that connection.
Well, neoliberalism relies on the idea that systemic problems are best solved by individual market choices and personal responsibility, rather than collective or state intervention.
Ah, so instead of fixing a toxic work environment, the burden is on you to optimize your resilience to it.
Exactly. It normalizes workplace stress by providing you a tool to manage it, rather than questioning why the stress exists. It integrates mental practice into your daily routine. You have to do your brain-building exercises.
She critiques the quick-fix society, but replaces it with mandatory, continuous cognitive labor.
Which leads us directly to Section 6, the crucial question.
Right. We've laid out the entire system, the design, the incentives, the loops. But, expert, I have to ask you explicitly, what is the crisis in perception here?
We have to answer this analytically. The crisis operates on several levels. First, there's the perception of distress itself.
Okay.
Usually, mental distress is perceived as purely biochemical. I have bad genes, or purely circumstantial sign. My life is terrible. This system challenges that by perceiving distress as a signal resulting from unmanaged thinking.
Which is a useful reframe.
It is. But the deeper crisis lies in the individualization of responsibility.
Here we go.
When you tell someone they have total agency over their brain and that their toxic thoughts are causing 90% of their physical illnesses, you obscure structural stressors.
Because if I'm anxious because I can't afford groceries due to systemic inflation, or because I'm facing systemic discrimination,
The neurocycle might help you not have a panic attack about it, which is good. But it frames the persistence of your anxiety as a failure of your own mind management.
it individualizes a structural problem. The power is entirely in your hands, but so is all of the blame.
Exactly. It blurs the boundary between neural determinism, my brain made me do it, and cognitive agency, I control my brain completely. The source argues strictly for agency.
But sometimes trauma or biology is larger than our capacity to five-step it away.
The surface debate out in the world is usually, is neuroplasticity real? Yes, of course it is. But the actual crisis in perception is the incentive architecture underneath it.
The idea that we must constantly surveil our own thoughts to prevent physical decay.
It creates a panopticon in your own mind. You become the guard, watching your own thoughts constantly. Oh no, is this thought toxic? Am I shortening my telomeres right now?
Which causes more stress.
Yes. So a systems-level analysis reveals that mind management models are wildly empowering.
Right.
They give you hope, control, they lack the side effects of pharmaceuticals.
But they are also constraining. They place a massive burden of effort and potential guilt on the user.
It's a heavy tool.
It is. And it leaves me with a final provocative thought for everyone listening. If our brains are reacting to a chaotic, structurally broken world with anxiety and stress, what if our hardware isn't broken at all?
What if it's working exactly as designed, correctly identifying a toxic environment?
Right. And maybe cleaning up our mental mess is just the first step, so we have the clarity to go out and clean up the actual mess in the world.
Now, that is a paradigm shift.
Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly.
This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.